In this tutorial, I'm going to take you through the process of setting up the cloth sim for an entire character. The way that this is going to be set up will be for a production environment. We're going to use multiple cloth simulations, and we're going to use point cache in order to save out this animation. And that way, when you go to render your file, you're only bringing in the point cached version of the mesh. You don't have this enormous file which has all the vertex information for every single vert in the cloth object. As you can see here, this is the mesh right here that's going to be our body. This is our collision mesh. I'm just going to freeze that real quick. And this right here is the cloth that we're going to render. You can see that it has, some modeled seams. It's got a lot of faces. They're not quads at all. And this right here is our driver object. You can see it's nice, and it's got, the quads are really laid out nice. No super long skinny faces. They're all roughly about the same size. And I used the conform wrap tool to wrap it to match. You create cloth drivers in the same way that you create collision objects, as in the collision object creation tutorial that I took you through previously. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, please do. It'll explain it in much more detail. But as you can see, this object is going to be a lot easier to sim and a lot cleaner to sim. I know that a lot of people use Garment Maker, and Garment Maker will give you objects more like this. I personally don't use Garment Maker at all. That's just a personal thing, because when I'm handed a rig, or when I'm handed a model to rig, including the cloth, typically the modelers have modeled the cloth. So, I've never really even received a mesh, aside from this one right here, that has been made with Garment Maker. So, that's enough explaining there. I'm kind of going to try to put together a lot of the tutorials that we've already done, which would include this chainmail sim, or this chainmail object. Let me go ahead and I'm going to put this, I'm going to make it see-through so you can kind of see what's going on. So I've got this chainmail. The reason I chose chainmail is it's going to be heavy, and this cloth right here we're going to do the chainmail first. We're going to simulate the chainmail first, and then we're going to simulate the jacket. And the jacket is obviously going to be a lot less heavier than the chainmail. So it's going to be like a thin jacket, not like a heavy leather jacket. But I just really want to take you through the process. It's not so much, let's make this exact, but I want you to see exactly, what steps you need to go through to make this work, and how much time you can save by making these two separate sims rather than one big, huge, gigantic sim. So the first thing that we're going to do, believe it or not, is we're going to grab the mesh itself, the body that we've skinned, and the first thing I want to do is I want to create a collision object. Even though this is my main collision object, I can use this for all my deformation, for all my collisions. I want to create something that will work just with the jacket. Just with the chainmail. So if I'm going to be simming the chainmail, I obviously do not need all the faces from here up. So we don't need to have all of these little faces and the fingers in the sim when we're doing chainmail. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to select the body itself, and I'm going to put an edit poly, and we're going to go ahead and select the mesh here. So let's go to side view, and we'll zoom in, and I'm going to go ahead and select all the faces from here to, say, here. Okay, and I'm going to click here on detach, and then I'm going to kill that modifier, and let's put this in box mode just for clarity's sake. So now I've got just this right here. Okay, and that's all I need for my simulation. I don't need the rest of the body. So we're going to take this and we're going to go ahead and skin wrap it. That way just going to test it real quick, make sure it's working. I obviously have some animation on it already. Now, before we go ahead and put cloth effects on here, what we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just work with the two objects that I need right now. And let's make this thing non-see-through. Okay. So you'll notice I have a bunch of little tiny faces in my cloth driver, and I have bigger faces in my body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and throw a mesh smooth on this. Mesh smooth of 1. Make sure you turn off ISO on display. And that should be good enough, really. And then I'm going to throw a mesh select on top. Now, anytime you use mesh smooth and possibly turbo smooth, you've got to put a mesh select above it. I've run into situations where mesh smooth will randomly change topology and then your sim won't work anymore. I don't know how to explain it, but I've just seen it happen where mesh smooth will cause something to happen and then your sim has to be redone because cloth sees it as changed for some reason. So I throw a mesh select at the top here to kind of collapse out the stack, and it kind of holds its shape and its topology. I don't know why it does that, but I've run into it, and you know, force a habit. Now I just do it every time. So we've got a mesh select on there. This is an editable mesh. Now, one thing to remember. Let me just put this so you can see. What I want here is, as you can see, 0, 0 is right here. And what I want is, I want all of my objects that are going to be point cached, I want their pivots to be at 0, 0, and I don't want anything mirrored, and I don't want anything that has non-uniform scale. So the best way to do that is to collapse. I have a script that is shipping with this DVD called collapse selected to poly at origin, and what it does is it creates a polygon at 0, 0, 0 with this pivot at 0, 0, and then attaches it, and then collapse it and deletes the original face. That way all of your pivots are always at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to want to select that mesh. Now I'm going to run collapse selected to poly at origin. So now you see I've got my pivot at 0, 0, 0. The next thing I want to do is I want to select all of my torus objects, all my chain link objects, I should say. And we'll go ahead and freeze those. Swap our freeze objects, and I want to, as I've shown you in previous tutorials, I want to take these chain links and I want to attach them to the surface of the driver object by their local Z. As you can see, Z is pointing straight out from the center of the torus. So we'll go ahead and say attach the surface by local Z, and then pick the mesh. Pick the driver mesh. So this might take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and pause and come back when it's through. Okay, now that the toruses, or the chain links, have been attached to the surface, go ahead and hide these helpers because we don't need them anymore. And And I'm also going to take these chain links and I'm going to lower the detail on them just to make it a little quicker for us to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the cloth object. Go ahead and rename this. I'm going to call it collision legs, and they are point bound to the surface. So, okay. So now we're ready to go ahead and throw cloth effects on here. Actually, no. First thing we got to do is we're going to skin this. I'll go ahead and unhide everything. We're just going to skin it to the pelvis. So, oops. Grab the cloth mesh for the chain links. And we're going to go ahead and skin that right to this bone right here. Okay. Okay, so now that that's skinned, we can go ahead and apply cloth effects to these two objects. Actually, I'm going to put the mesh select right above this. Grab both of these, and I'm going to put the cloth effects modifier. So we'll go to object properties, and the collision legs we're going to make obviously a collision object. We're going to make the depth 0.5 and the offset 0.2. And the chainmail we're going to make a cloth object, and we're going to start with our chain start settings, and we'll lower these, and we're going to say OK. Now I'm going to select this cloth object, and I'm going to grab these verts right here. I'm going to make a group and call it male pin, and we're going to attach it to the surface of the collision object, and we're going to make the offset 0.2. Okay. So that cloth sim is now set up and we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and swap our freeze objects out. Now the next thing that we're going to do is, for speed's sake, we're going to save this object off. And let's go ahead and unfreeze everything again. Freeze that, freeze the body, we'll freeze the legs. Okay. So now we're going to unhide all those attached nulls points. We're going to grab this object right here, and I'm going to go ahead and actually delete the cloth effects modifier. Actually, let's undo that. I'm going to go ahead and save this file. delete everything off of here real quick. I'm going to do a save selected. Just grab everything. Go save selected. Sorry about that. And I'm just going to call this chainmail cloth master. So this is what we're going to load our point cache onto. And the reason I did that is I really don't need to see these chain links when I'm doing my sims. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the chain links and all the little points that are on it. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to open up the other file. Before we deleted the skin and the cloth effects and all that. So grab that. And we'll delete the chainmail and all their surface attach points. Okay. So we're going to grab the chainmail, and we're going to grab that chainmail collision object. Okay. Now the one thing that we're going to do here is, since we're going to have two separate sims, I'm going to need this cloth object, or a duplicate of it, to use in the next sim. So I'm going to go ahead and make a snapshot of this. And just for clarity's sake, I'm going to put that in box mode. So here's our snapshot. And what we're going to do is we're going to skin wrap this to the cloth object. So go ahead and bind this to this object. We're going to skin wrap it. And once it's complete, I'm just going to freeze it because I don't need it anymore. Okay, so there's that. So this sim is now ready to go. And we're going to go ahead and swap our objects again. And I'm going to hide, actually I'm going to go ahead and skin wrap this high resolution messy mesh to my cloth driver. So we'll go ahead and we'll bind that to that. I'm going to pause real quick because I do believe it's going to take a little while, and I'll come right back. Okay, so that object is now skin wrapped, and before we do anything else, I'm going to select these two objects. I'm going to hit save selected, and we're going to call this coat cloth master. Okay, so in this case, I can go ahead now and delete the coat. Don't need that in the scene either. Okay, so now we've got our object from the previous sim, which is skin wrapped to the other cloth object. And we've got this object, which is our cloth driver for the jacket. Now I need to select the mesh and delete what I don't need, like I did before. So we're going to go ahead and put an edit poly modifier on it, and I'm going to select the faces. Actually, it'd be easier this time around to select what I don't need. I'm going to keep the feet in the sim, and I don't need the head. Actually, I don't need the feet either. Okay, so now we're going to go select invert, and then save selected, or I'm sorry, detach, and then delete that modifier. So if we grab that object, we're going to go ahead and skin wrap that to our... Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry. There's a reason why I'm not going to as well. So let's go ahead and freeze this. Now, I accidentally grabbed a couple extra faces here. What we're going to do is we're going to grab these edges right here. Actually, do one for each hand. I'm going to copy this out. And then grab these verts and scale them in just so that they're lined up. And then scale them out like so. Now the reason I'm doing this is I don't need the hand. I don't want to use the hand for the sim, but I do want there to be some sort of collision for the hands. Now I could always use the hands, but in this particular case I just don't think I'm going to need it. So I just want to have something that'll push it out of the way if the hand is bent up or down or what have you. So we'll do the same thing over here. Go to vertex mode. Scale these in. We'll scale these up so that they're roughly the same. Okay, and then just so I have enough faces for the collision, I'm going to go ahead and connect this with a setting of 2. Actually 1. I'm going to put mesh smooth on here anyway. Okay, so there you go. Now, the only thing left for me to do is to take this skin modifier, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it on this object. Now, all of my skinning is done with envelopes. I don't use any vertex weighting. I do everything with envelopes. As you can see, I've got some pretty wacky envelopes, but when you see them in motion, it just works great. So it's a lot better, it saves you a heck of a lot more time. You end up with a lot of extra bones, but you can do things with these extra bones that you just can't do any other way. So we're going to go ahead and swap that back out again, and let's freeze these two. Now the only thing that we're going to have to do is, well, the only vertex weighting we're going to have to do now is I'm just going to grab one of the bones for the hand, and I'm going to grab these verts and I'm going to assign it to that bone. Do the same thing over here. Grab these verts, grab one of these metacarpal bones, and say 1. Now I'll show you why we need to do that. Okay, so here is our biped, and the only reason I'm pulling this up is so I can show you. So when the hand goes like so, you can see that collision object is going with it. And it's just going to basically push the jacket out of the way if the hand happens to go there. Obviously, if the thumb is stretched out, it might interpenetrate, but in that case, if you need that, then you would include the thumb in the sim. So let's go ahead and freeze these. Just want to freeze all my cloth stuff so I can hide my biped. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead. We don't need this mesh anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and I now want to skin the jacket to this object. By the way, I am using a script called skin selected to 1 bone. So if you go ahead and go to subobject, you can see that all the verts are weighted to that 1 bone. And the reason is we are going to be starting our sim in figure mode, and that's what we're always going to do when we do a sim, especially with biped. Okay, so now we have 2 sims set up. we don't actually. I'm going to do that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and throw a mesh smooth on here of 1. Turn off isoline display. And then I'm going to throw a mesh select on top of that. So now we've got these two objects, which are part of that sim. And then this object that's skin wrapped to the other cloth sim. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in box mode, just for clarity's sake. Let's go ahead and freeze that and swap our freezes. Okay. Alright, so now we can select all these objects. One side note, really, is you could go in and delete all the faces here that are shared with the chainmail, but we're not going to do that right now. And this is the collision for the jacket. Okay. So I am ready to go ahead and assign my cloth settings. So grab everything. I'm going to throw the cloth effects modifier on it. Go object properties. And the object is the collision body, which I haven't renamed. So we're going to say the depth is 0.5 and the offset is 0.2. The chainmail, we're also going to make a collision object, our chainmail collision object. And we're going to give it a depth of 0.1 and an offset of 0.2. And if I look here, okay, and then we're going to make this a cloth object. And I've got a setting here called basketball clothes, and it's just something that I've used all the time. I still call it basketball clothes. So you can see this. It doesn't have much of a bend. The U and VB curves are, pretty low. The stretch, it can stretch a bit, and the density it's not that high, it's not that low. And I am using edge springs. So we're going to say, also the repulsion I have up pretty high at 5. That's if I turn on self collision. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And now I need to set the settings for these two sims. So let's grab any one of the objects actually. Now I already have my gravity set at -2000 for this object, and that's like a normal cloth object. I'm going to put the subsamples at 5, and I'm not going to turn on self collision for this demo just so it's easier and quicker for you guys to see it. So I'm going to swap out my sims, and I can hide this object now because I no longer need it. And I'm going to grab the chainmail object, and I'm going to make the gravity -3000. So we obviously want it to look heavier, and that's subsample of 5. Again, I'm not going to turn on self collision for this tutorial just because I don't want it to take forever. Now, one thing to remember: don't be afraid to throw a lot of faces at cloth effects. I think people get suckered into thinking, well, the fewer the faces, the better the sim, and it's just really not the case, especially when you're talking about an area like this. Because the problem is, when you have too few faces, cloth effects is going to freak out, basically, just like any other package. For example, let's say you have a face, or let's say we had 2 faces, and we had the body like so, right? And then let's say I had it bend here for some reason. I don't know why. Let's say it did this. Now, sorry. Now the faces you had were like this. So now this face needs to bend right here in order to look correct. But it can't because it's one long face. But if you had it like this, you had faces like that, there'd be plenty of faces to actually do the deformation. So, people think, oh, it's going to go quicker because I have fewer faces, and that's actually not the case. It might actually take longer because it's trying to calculate, wow, how am I going to move this face? How can I tweak this face around and move it so it'll fit? But if you have more faces, like in this example right here where I have all these faces, it doesn't have to think as hard because it can just, bend it here rather than try and bending it in the middle of the face, which it can't do. So do not be afraid to throw a lot of faces at cloth effects. It works better. From my experience, and I've done a lot of sims, a lot of character sims, especially at my time at Blur, I can tell you that the more faces you throw at it, the better it can look, and the more reliable the sim is going to be. You're going to get more folding in the object. You're going to have more freedom of movement because it's going to be able to bend more. So don't be afraid to throw lots of faces at cloth effects. Believe me, there's a fast package, and I'm going to be doing another DVD soon, and I'm going to be covering doing automated network simming using scripts. So you'll see that you'll be able to save a lot of time by doing things this way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing, obviously, is we have to run this sim first. But what we want to do is, I'm going to have to show you one more thing. Let's bring back our biped. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to grab my center of mass and I'm going to leave figure mode, which I have a hotkey for. Now you notice I'm starting at frame 30 and going to 177. So I'm going to back it up to frame 30 and I'm going to run a script, which is also included on this DVD, called Prep Bipeds for Cloth Sim. So what this is going to do, actually I'm going to do a quick save. What that'll do is it's going to take your biped. Let's go ahead and leave expert mode so I can show you what's going on. So if I drop back to 0, you can see that the animation, there's no animation prior to 30. Okay. But I need to set my frame range to the range of the shot. So let's say our shot is from 30 to 177. Okay. So once I have the frame range set, then I can go ahead and run the script, Prep Bipeds for Cloth Sim. So I'm about to prepare one biped for cloth simulation. If you have multiple bipeds, you can do multiple. And I'm going to say yes. I don't have any max objects, so I want to save for IK binding. So I say no. And there you go. So now you'll notice that the animation starts 20 frames prior to frame 10. And if I drag the slider, you can see it goes from figure mode into the animation. Okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is, you'll notice that my cloth objects are still in their default state. So all I want to do is I want to go delete object cache, reset state. And you can see it pops right where it should go. This is why you don't link your cloth objects, you skin them. Because when you skin them, this always works. When you link them, sometimes it doesn't work. Couldn't tell you why. Just by force of habit, I always skin everything. And it always works. So, don't fix what ain't broken, basically. So reset state. Oh, wrong object. So let's go. There we go. We got the cloth object. Delete object cache. Reset state. So now everything is ready to go, and I can start my cloth sim. So we need to start the sim at frame 10. I'm going to do the chainmail first. And depending on how long this looks like it's going to take, I'll either pause it or let you see. I'm most likely going to pause this. So I'm going to hit simulate now. And I'm going to go ahead and pause. It looks like so far it's estimated it's going to take 20 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and come back. 30 minutes. When I hit pause earlier, I realized that I had started simming the jacket first, so obviously that was a mistake. I lowered the sum samples to 2 because I just wanted to be a little bit quicker, and it looked just fine, really. So let's see. As you can see, if I drag the slider, the reason you want to have so many faces is because you can get real nice folds like that. It just looks really good. So now that that's done, what we're going to do is go back to the frame 10. I'm going to grab the jacket. I'm going to freeze that, and we're going to take. I'm going to swap out our freezes, and now I'm going to go ahead. Now that the chainmail is simmed, the driver here that I skin wrapped to it is ready to go. So now these two collision objects are ready to drive that. So let's go back here, and I'm going to leave my subsamples at 2. I'm going to hit simulate, and this is going to take a little while because there are a lot of faces. So I'm going to go ahead and hit pause again and come back when it is done.